This is a lecture from Open Tuition. For the free lecture notes that go with this podcast, please visit opentuition.com.
Page 93 then, chapter 15. Outsourcing the use of external suppliers as a source of finished products. This folding camper manufacturer that I mentioned to you, did I mention a folding camper manufacturer to you earlier? Sort of a cross between a caravan and a tent. Did I mention it to you, or was it the P2 course earlier this week? Probably the P2 course. They manufactured is a hybrid version of a tent and a caravan. It was a big thing. It's the size of the length of any, and the width of a standard caravan, but it was only low. It was maybe half again the height of a desk. So you could still look through the rear view mirror and have clear access. It was just sort of the level of the bottom of the back windscreen. And when you got to the campsite, you wound down the legs of the folding camper and took off the cover, the canvas cover, which was waterproof. You then opened up one side of it, it made a double bed. Opened up another side, it made another double bed. And they had a fold-down shower cabinet and fold-down toilet and kitchen within there. A wonderful thing. And they decided, whilst I was still their auditor, they decided that they were going to outsource the manufacture of elements of this folding camper. It was quicker, it was cheaper, it was more effective, and the cost of stock holding was no longer theirs. It meant that they could phone up their outsourcing manufacturer for the chassis, the framework and the wheels, and they could phone them up and say, we need 8 more to be delivered first thing Monday morning. So all the problems of manufacture, they outsourced it. And all the stock holding costs they outsourced, and so long as they had a reliable supplier, then it never disrupted their production processes. So outsourcing may be outsourcing production, like my folding camper client, or it may be outsourcing services like data processing, or machine maintenance, or computer system maintenance, known as subcontracting. The use of the services of an external supplier does not reduce the ultimate responsibility of the directors for conducting an organised entity, the business of the company. So just because we outsource, this does not get rid of the responsibility of the directors for continuing to run an orderly entity. Advantages and disadvantages. I have not the slightest doubt that if I gave you the time to sit down and think, you would think of all these advantages and disadvantages. But we've got a number of them written down, not necessarily an exhaustive list, and I would appreciate it if you could add to this list. But the advantages of outsourcing, it frees up the time for our existing employees. My folding camper manufacturer, having previously made the framework for this folding camper, now when they outsource it, it means they have 4 people who can now do other work in the manufacture of the finished product. So it frees up the time, and it means we don't have to have as many employees. We can reduce the wage bill by outsourcing the production of a component part. It allows the company to take advantage of specialist expertise rather than investing in these facilities ourselves. And again, with the manufacture of a chassis, the manufacture of a frame, I no longer need the welding equipment. I no longer need the specialist oxyacetylene torches in order to make the frame. So I can not only cut down on my employment costs, I can cut down on my costs of equipment to manufacture the framework. So again, there's a cost saving. Services may be performed more quickly and to a higher standard. If you outsource to a specialist, then the probability is there will be fewer mistakes and fewer faulty goods being produced because the specialist is a specialist. It may be cheaper once you take time savings and opportunity costs into account. It could be cheaper. And the cost of holding inventory is gone. And then so long as you have reliable suppliers, production is not disrupted. But there may be disadvantages. There's no guarantee the service will be performed to the organisation's satisfaction. Again, thinking back to my folding camper and the frame manufacturers, there's no guarantee that a frame manufacturer is going to stay in business. And if they go out of business and I only have the one supplier, I'm then got disrupted production because I've now got to find somebody else and give them their technical drawings and specifications and build up a relationship with them, and they have to learn the framework that I want to be manufactured. So in a situation like that, it is ideal if you can have more than one manufacturer and you give each of the two of them an order every fortnight. I want this on Monday, and then the next one I say, these are the numbers I want for the next Monday. So that would be preferable, because if I'm totally dependent on only one organisation, there is the accepted risk that if they are unable to supply my needs, then I'm going to suffer. Maybe more expensive than providing the service in-house. Well, yes, the cost of a frame for a folding camper is probably greater than it would have cost me to buy the raw materials and manufacture it, because I've already got the employees. But think in terms of opportunity cost, time saving, freeing up the employees, reduction and elimination of stock holding costs. If you think about all these other matters involved, then it's probably not a major element. Again, data processing. If I've already got the personnel to process the data, yeah, but what if I don't need that personnel? What if I can save on the wages, the holiday pay, the maternity pay, the bonuses, the benefits in kind? By getting rid of a department and outsourcing it, I can save all of that. Save even on office space. I'm growing so big, but some of the space that I'm having to grow into is already occupied by a department which I can outsource. So I can delay the sourcing of new office premises or the acquisition of new storage facilities. By performing the service itself, we retain or develop skills which we may need in the future. That was the example I gave you of the internal audit. If we already have a department and get rid of it to outsource, then we lose that knowledge and those skills. Commercially sensitive data may get into the wrong hands by outsourcing. Again, data processing outsourcing, you're giving them raw data to produce into information. You're giving them confidential information about your confidential data, about your own activities. That's one of the disadvantages generally of outsourcing internal audit. You're increasing the number of persons and people who have access to confidential information, and confidential information clearly is important to companies. There may be opposition from employees if outsourcing involves redundancies. I'm trying to think of, there's one on the radio and I can't remember who it was. I can't remember. But they've gone out on strike yesterday. Teachers? Nursing staff? I can't remember. But they've gone out on strike because the restructuring is involving redundancies, and the workers want to have a 6-month delay before any redundancies are brought into effect. And the company has said, no, we can't afford that. You accept that the redundancies will take place, and they may as well take place now. And I can't remember the name of the organisation. Damn. Maybe you heard it on... Did you hear it on BBC Radio last night, the World News? You don't listen to the BBC World News. It's time you did. It's time you did, particularly those of you in the room who are doing P1. If you're doing P1 this time, you need to be listening to BBC World News, because every day, just about, there is something of direct consequence and direct impact on P1. I'm serious on that. I'm absolutely serious. The Accountancy Age. When I read to you articles from Accountancy Age, it's a daily thing that's something relevant and important for your P7 studies or P1 studies. You should be listening, or at least reading, BBC News on the radio or on the internet. Audit considerations relating to entity. I know none of you I know none of you in the room is going to start listening to BBC News. I know now, deep down in my heart, that BBC News is probably the last thing on your minds at this moment. Audit considerations relating to entities using service organisations. Service organisation is a company which provides services to another. They undertake a wide variety of activities, and there you've got information processing, maintenance of accounting records, facilities management, maintenance or safeguards. What's facilities management? I had a client, I didn't have it for long because I decided I didn't like the way they operated. He was a facilities management for a brewery company in Britain, in the UK. And what he did, the brewing company owned 130 pubs, and he had got the contract, as an electrician, he had got the contract to manage the facilities, maintain the facilities. So when when a light in a pub went out, when a bulb went out, what would you do if it were you? When a bulb blows at home, what do you do? You change the bulb. But the policy of the company was that if a bulb goes out, you ring the company rings my temporary client will drive 80 miles to the pub in order to get his ladder out, take the old bulb out and put a new bulb in, and then charge the company for the service that is provided. And that's facilities management. That's what he used to do. Anything electrical, the brewing company called upon my client. And I say I didn't have the client long because he was telling me at one stage, and it was very shortly after that I made the decision to leave, he was telling me at one stage that one of the directors had an outdoor swimming pool with lights in, and the electrical work involved and the maintenance of the electrical work involved had been delegated to him, but he didn't invoice it. I said, well, surely that was a lot of money involved. He said, I recovered the money in other ways. And what he'd done is he'd inflated his charge for changing this light bulb, which is 80 miles away. He might charge 90 miles, or he might say it took 4 hours instead of 3 hours. And I decided this was not the sort of person I wanted to be involved with. Facilities management. Maintenance or safe custody of assets. Yeah, you can outsource it. The outsourcing of the car park here, those of you that don't have access to the car park, the maintenance of the security of the car park is outsourced to an internationally renowned security company, which has the digit 4 within its name. So that's outsourcing. I presume that the occupants of the building where the car park is available for access to their employees, I presume that each of the companies involved in the building here pays an amount on a monthly basis to that security company, I assume, and that will be outsourcing. Initiation or execution of transactions on behalf of the other entity, you can outsource it, you can delegate the responsibility, for instance, to an estate agent, a realtor, as the Americans call them. So if you wanted to acquire a new premise, then you would contact, for instance, Remax or Oberhaus to source new premises for you. That's outsourcing the service and getting them to source the appropriate premises. Am I not right that one of the big 4 firms, 2 of the big 4 firms have, whilst I've been here this last 9 years, have changed their premises? I think PwC, for instance, were in Shevchenko Street. They were, I'm sure. And Deloitte's were, I think, not on Vianolio, Svitrigalias. I think they were on Svitrigalias. And they've outsourced the task of finding new premises, and possibly to Oberhaus or Remax or another household name of estate agents. Service organisations may undertake activities on a dedicated basis for one company, like my electrician, dedicated entirely to maintaining the electrical supply and elements to the brewing company, or on a shared basis. They say we specialise in maintaining electrical elements for all the brewing companies within the area. So they could do it on a shared basis or just purely in specialist for one entity. Impact on audit planning. Oh, here we go again, audit planning. Impact on audit planning. The auditor should determine the significance of the service organisation to the client and the relevance to the audit. We've got a practical problem, in theory at least, a theoretical practical problem. If the outsourcer is an outsourcer of data processing, you need to be confident that the data which is processed is reliably processed, but you're not likely to be able to get access to that data or to the process procedures adopted by the outsourcer. And yet you have to still form and reach and express your opinion within true and fair. You have to reach an opinion on the reliability of the accuracy and security of the information which is provided to the service provider. But you're not going to be allowed necessarily access to the service provider's records to see how their procedures operate. We need to obtain an understanding of the contractual terms which apply and the controls which are in place, and these should be documented for the audit file. You would actually want a copy of the contract which your client has with the outsourced provider. Consider the following. There's 7 bullet points there, and again I think they're probably self-evident, but if you just read through them, there's 7 bullet points, the top half of page 94. The 6th one, whether the service organisation has agreed to indemnify the company in the event of performance failure. If they fail to produce a set of monthly financial statements, management accounts, within the agreed time, and the company's in a little bit of financial difficulty with their bank, and the bank says we want to see the management accounts by the 10th of April, and the service provider doesn't get them there on the 10th of April, the bank could pull the plug. It could be quite disastrous consequences if the service provider's performance is not in accordance with the agreed contractual performance. But it could be that the extent of their indemnity, the extent of their, inverted commas, guarantee, is only to a limited amount, and yet it could be that as a result of their lateness in the production of the management accounts, the bank has already made the decision to ask for the repayment of the overdraft. It could be disastrous consequences. So the extent of the indemnity which is given will be of importance, particularly where your client is in a financially difficult position. How comprehensive is that indemnity coverage? Audit procedures, we should assess the effect of the service organisation's activities on our own assessment of risk of material misstatement, and we'll take these into account. The nature of the service provided, the degree to which authority is delegated, and the arrangements for ensuring quality. Whether activities involve assets with a high risk of loss or misappropriation. Reputation and integrity of those managing the service organisation. And our history, or the history of the service organisation, in terms of the reliability of the service that they provide. How many mistakes have been found? How frequently mistakes made? Is classification of expense consistently and regularly applied? And if there's change in personnel at the service organisation, you may find classification is not consistently applied. Telephone rental and telephone expense may not be separated, and therefore your classification and your comparables are no longer comparative. Your comparatives are no longer comparable. Auditors also need to assess controls operated by the company over information given. Will you keep a copy of the raw data? Will you keep the total of the raw data that you've passed across to be data processed, in order that when they send a report you can compare the value that they have processed with the value that you sent to them, to make sure that you've got completeness of the recording of your data. Also review the actual experience of adjustments to and errors in, I just mentioned. And if a service organisation maintains all or part of the company's records, then we need to assess whether arrangements affecting reporting responsibilities in relation to accounting records. Our reporting responsibilities with reference to accounting records are, and I'll quote from Devro Audit Report again, we are required to report by exception if, in our opinion, inadequate accounting records have been kept, or adequate accounting records have not been kept by the parent. So we need to confirm that the accounting records kept by the service provider satisfies the statutory requirement of maintenance of proper accounting records, or adequate accounting records. So we normally report, where I may determine, whether the auditor should determine effective procedures to obtain necessary evidence for the audit, either by direct access. You've got a problem there. One of the security elements of the service provider is that there should be restriction of access to the service provider's premises. Part of the security arrangements should be restricted access. And it may be that you will roll up at the service provider and says, I'm the auditor of ABC Limited, and they say, congratulations, but you're not coming in here. Part of our security arrangements is that nobody's allowed in here except our own employees. So you may have problems with getting access. You shouldn't do. Nowadays, service bureaus and accounting service bureaus will normally have within the contract that the bureau will give full assistance to the external auditors. Auditors normally perform the following procedures: will inspect the records and documents held by the company and establish the effectiveness of controls operated by the company, by the client, as well as by the service provider. Obtain representations to confirm balances and transactions. We'll get that from the service organisation. If the service organisation is not an accountant provider but a stockholder, for instance, an inventory holder, kept in secure locations, then we'd want a certificate from them, a third-party written certificate on an original document, in order to confirm the extent of the inventory that they are holding on the client's behalf. We'll perform analytical review procedures on records kept by the company, by our company, or on returns received from the organisation. Inspect records and documents at the service organisation. And make inquiry of the service organisation's auditor about specific elements, because they may have done work on, should have done work on the service provider's own systems, and that will give us a degree of comfort about the security of our data. And review information from the service organisation concerning design and performance of control systems. When we're using a service organisation, we need to increase our focus on whether to include the service organisation's audit report as part of audit evidence. If they have received an unqualified opinion saying that their own activities represent a true and fair view, then that will give us a degree of comfort about the service organisation. Then carrying out risk assessment, perform procedures to ensure that the service organisation's controls are operating effectively, including a review of the service organisation's own management, that they are happy that their controls are appropriate. We need to satisfy ourselves about competence and independence of the service organisation's auditor. And that the organisation's auditor's report provides sufficient appropriate evidence about the effectiveness of internal controls operated. I'm going to skip page 96 and move on to page 97. And we're nearly there, aren't we? Just checking on how many more pages there are, just a quick look to see how many more we've got to suffer.